Hi there, this is Jason Poliarco. In behalf of our South Coastal teaching team, we want to welcome all of you as we explore another amazing spiritual discipline called solitude. I've had the amazing opportunity to team up with Tracy Jones on this lesson, who you will hear from later in this presentation. We want to start off by encouraging all of us to imagine a world that is stripped of the internet. Imagine a world that is stripped of media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, news about all the recent world turmoil, the political battle, and all of the world's noise. Can you imagine that? Imagine the silence. A world where the whispers of God cuts through the silence, guiding our hearts to profound truths. Well, imagine no longer because this world is actually possible through biblical solitude. Solitude is a spiritual discipline where silence and stillness meet spiritual awakening. We are so excited as we take the time to explore this discipline together. Richard Foster in his book describes solitude as more of a state of mind and of heart more than it is a place. This is described as inward solitude. We also want to mention some important effects of solitude, which is highlighted in the study guide that is accompanied by this book. The first effect states that the less we are mesmerized by human voices, the more we are able to hear the divine voice. It also says that the less that we are bound by others' expectations, the more we are open to God's expectations. Another effect of solitude is it states that, but in solitude we die not only to others, but also to ourselves. And lastly, another effect that is mentioned, it says that through our solitude, an open inner space has been created through which God can find us. Now, to encourage discussion within your teams, we have some questions that we want to offer. The first one is, what is your initial thought or feeling about the topic of solitude? And the second, what is the difference between loneliness and solitude, and which do you experience more? And the third, as an ancient discipline, do you think solitude still applies to us today? Why or why not? And lastly, what are personal challenges that make solitude difficult for you to practice? So please feel free to pause this presentation now and discuss the questions that best applies to you. Now let's take a moment to take a close look at how Jesus himself practiced the spiritual discipline of solitude. We can find a moment in the book of Mark in chapter 1, verse 35, where it states, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Now we feel it's important for us to consider what was happening during this time in Jesus' ministry. And if we go back a couple passages, we see that the evening before, Jesus was serving a great number of people. We can find that after Jesus healed Simon's mother-in-law from a fever, a great number of people, as the Bible describes a whole town, approached the door of the house that Jesus was in. It was this time when Jesus was healing many from sickness and was also casting out demons. So needless to say, this was a moment in Jesus' ministry that was really busy. And that following morning is where we can find Jesus practicing solitude. So as we look closely at this verse, we can find three elements of solitude. The first element is intentionality. We can see this by the time of day where Jesus chose to go off into a solitary place early in the morning while it was still dark. What do you think this reveals to us about how Jesus valued his time in solitude? The second element is the physical element of solitude, where we see how Jesus got up and left the house that he was in and went off to a solitary place. We can see how Jesus separated himself from the busy environment that he was in order to be alone. And the third element of solitude is how Jesus used this time in the presence of the Father in prayer. And what we see here is solitude is normally accompanied with prayer as well. Now, to encourage further discussion with your teams, here are some more discussion questions that we would like you to consider talking through. The first question is, how do you think this verse reflects the importance of solitude in spiritual practices? The second, in what ways do you find early mornings or late nights suitable for solitude? And lastly, why do you think Jesus chose solitude to connect with God, and how can we apply this to our daily lives today? Please feel free to pause this presentation now to have the discussion.
There is a solitude of the heart that can be maintained at all times. Crowds, or the lack of them, have little to do with this inward attentiveness. Foster argues that solitude is not possible without silence, and this inner solitude is interconnected with inner silence. Along with silence must also come the heart of listening. In silence we learn to listen to God more attentively. Solitude is most meaningful when it brings us to deeper prayer and connection to God. When we are able to practice solitude in silence, we are able to position ourselves to hear God's voice, direction, and His will in our lives. A few passages to consider. Ecclesiastes 3:7, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. So there's times for silence as well as times for speaking. Ecclesiastes 5:1-2, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know what they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. There is value in silence and in learning to listen. Psalms 4:4, tremble and do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent. It is in that silence that we can listen to God's heart. Habakkuk 2:20, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Some things for you to think about. Can you think of any other reasons why silence is vital for solitude? Is silence difficult for you? If so, how? What are some practicals that can help with remaining in silence? Foster says, solitude is more a state of mind and heart than it is a place. There is a solitude of the heart that can be maintained at all times. Solitude produces precious fruit in our lives. It helps us to develop increased sensitivity and compassion for others. Through solitude, we become more attentive and responsive to the needs of those around us. We are more mindful and aware. Solitude and silence can teach us to appreciate others for who they are and not for what they say. It helps us connect more to God and to the people in our lives. So what are some tips for practicing solitude? How about little solitudes? Take advantage of little moments throughout your day for moments of solitude. These can serve as moments of rest and refreshment. How about early in the morning in your bed before tending to your family or gearing up for the day? How about during your cup of coffee before you start your workday? Instead of listening to the news or music, just enjoy your cup of tea or your coffee. As you drive in the car, keep the radio off. See what that's like. Try going for a short walk without headphones, just in silence. How about times at night when the house is quiet before you go to sleep? Just grab those moments of solitude. Find a quiet place. an environment or a specific place where you can experience silence and solitude. Maybe dedicate a corner or a room in your home where you can enjoy silence and solitude. Build a little sanctuary where one can be alone and silent. Maybe it's just a chair. How about outdoors? In the backyard, a park, or somewhere out in nature. Just practice having a quiet place where you can be in silence and solitude. Practice making our words few, but making them full. Make what you say meaningful, so maybe we say less. How about trying to unplug, intentionally detach from electronics, including phones, computers, or any other connected device during times of solitude? Try planning some retreats. Schedule times of solitude into your calendar. Maybe it's a day, a long weekend, or even a whole week. Pray for direction. Ask God for peace and clarity of mind to pursue solitude. Ask for direction for a quiet place. Ask for help on how to fill the emptiness of silence with His presence. With this list as a starting point, which one of these practical steps of solitude would you find most helpful at this point in your life?